everyone. Good morning. This is Sandra Hess, founder of DTC Wine Workshops, and I have the pleasure to introduce Jenni Linteo, DTC Wine Compliance Management Specialist, in this introductory webinar. Welcome, Jenni.
Thanks, Sandra. I'm happy to be here.
Thanks so much for taking some time out to share with us best practices around direct-to-consumer wine compliance. For those of you joining today, we'll take about the next 20 minutes to hear best practices and tips and tricks from Jenni. And please do take some time to jot down any questions you might have. We're happy to address at the end. And as we get started this morning, I'd like to introduce, first of all, DTC Wine Workshops has a group of now 12 consultants. Jenni is the latest member of the DTC Consultant Network, helping wineries throughout the nation of various sizes in the areas of direct-to-consumer wine sales, customer retention, and brand expansion. And so as you'll see here in Jenni's bio page on the site, you have an opportunity to learn more about her background. She's very detail-oriented, has supported various winemakers throughout the Napa Valley, and has seen an opportunity to support winemakers, allowing them to do what they do best, making the wine. And so her services, when you have some time to check out her page, includes everything from helping out with setting up the permits, assisting with licensing for both out-of-state requirements in California, and then also the full end of the spectrum when it comes to managing things like wine club, licensing, your reporting obviously is a pretty big one. And when you have some time, also take a look at her services breakdown here and schedule a complimentary introduction from today's webinar. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jenni.
All right. So once again, my name is Jenni Linteo, and I am the owner and CEO of First Class Wine Compliance here in Napa, California. And today we're going to talk about direct-to-consumer shipping compliance. So I'm going to talk first about how my compliance services began and how I got into the lovely world of wine compliance. I have a very dear friend who has a very small production family winery in the Coombsville AVA of Napa. And one night we were drinking her delicious cab, and she was lamenting about getting her direct-to-consumer shipping license in the great state of Texas. And I asked her about that. I said I didn't know anything about it. And she basically told me that there was a bunch of forms she needed to fill out, and she had to submit her labels for approval, and she just didn't have time to do that. And so I said, hey, do you need some help with that? Because as a paralegal for the last 28 years, boy, has it really been that long, that's my wheelhouse. Forms, regulations, laws, procedure, government agencies, all of my years working for lawyers across the Bay Area has really honed my skills in those areas. And so I helped her out a little bit, and she said, you would be great at this. You should do this. So I was intrigued. I started looking online at the TTB website, doing a lot of their tutorials and their seminars. I took a class over at Napa Valley College with Ann Reynolds, whom a lot of you know as Wine Compliance Alliance. She's a good friend and a mentor, and I love it. I love paperwork. I know that sounds strange, but it's what I do best, and I thrive in the world of organization, attention to detail, and the ability to really unravel the web that surrounds wine compliance, and especially direct-to-consumer wine shipping, which is what we're going to talk about today. Okay, so here's a list of the services that we offer. We do the full range of compliance, from permitting with the California ABC and the TTB, all the federal requirements that you need to get a bonded winery going. We do a lot of out-of-state requirements, which is what we're talking about today: the direct-to-consumer shipping licensing, direct-to-wholesale shipping licensing, monthly reports that are mandatory when you ship out of state. We do California requirements, the licensing, we can do duplicate O2 licensing for tasting rooms, get you a seller's permit and the wine grower report through the Board of Equalization. I'm also a notary, so I offer notary services. I can do fictitious business names filings. I've also had experience in wine club management using VineSpring and Vin65, and I'm happy to research and get any state licensing for wineries that are located outside of California. I like to do that. I think it's really challenging.
Okay, so thank you so much for that, Jenny. And so what are the benefits of hiring a compliance specialist? I know that, we've talked a little bit about the services and things that you offer, but I would love to learn about, why wineries are now needing to hire specialists.
Well, Sandra, compliance specialists like me, we have a certain skill set, and that skill set is conducive to the world of direct-to-consumer shipping. We have organization, we have, and I know I'm going to say this a lot through this presentation, attention to detail. We are able to read the regulations and laws surrounding the shipping procedures and really interpret them and understand then what the procedure is for licensing and reporting. And there's a lot of wineries out there that use shipping platforms, Ship Compliant being the biggie. I have a really good relationship with Ship Compliant. I have a couple clients who have Ship Compliant accounts. And the benefit to having someone like me working with your tasting room staff, with your wine club director, using Ship Compliant is that it gives you an extra layer of protection and expertise when it comes to the monthly reporting and obtaining the shipping licensing. I like Ship Compliant. I use it a lot. It's a great resource. It's a great service, but having someone who has the expertise and has the skill set to use Ship Compliant on a daily basis and be able to understand it and understand the regulations is a really good thing. And I have clients who I do everything manually for them, that they do not have a software platform, and in that instance you really want to have someone who has a lot of expertise in these kinds of situations, because you're going to need someone who can call the ABC and talk to them and find out what is required to get those licenses so you can ship to a national audience.
Excellent. So this brings me right to the next question around, once a winery decides that they want to go, more in the national space and really ship more wine to a national direct-to-consumer audience, at what point then do they decide that they need to hire on a specialist?
Well, again, it's the skill set that's needed to deal with the regulations surrounding the shipment of wine to out-of-state customers. You want to be able, if someone calls you from New Hampshire, you want to say, sure, yeah, we can send you a case of wine, no problem. But that person also needs to speak with your compliance person, because the regulations surrounding shipping wine out of state, and as I say here, is a constant evolving web. And there's four things I'm going to talk about today: the laws, the licensing, the reporting, and the taxes and fees, because those are the four main areas that your compliance specialist needs to have expertise in order to make sure you're compliant in all the states you're shipping to. So let's dig right in. Let's talk about the laws a little bit. Obviously, since the time of Prohibition and the time it was repealed in 1933, every state has basically enacted and made their own laws surrounding what alcohol you can ship into their state, and that includes both on-site and off-site sales. A lot of states have different regulations for on-site and off-site sales, and your compliance specialist will know about those. The other thing I want to talk about a little bit is the shipping from fulfillment centers. Many wineries have fulfillment centers throughout the valley, and they are an excellent resource to have. However, there's definitely a gray area when you ship from a licensed fulfillment center. Most laws and regulations state that if you are selling the wine, then you need to have the shipping license. If you are selling it and shipping it, you need to hold the license. And for many years, the fulfillment centers have sort of made it easier for winemakers because they don't have to go get licensing in lots of states. They can just ship under their fulfillment centers licensing. And while that's great, there's so many laws that are constantly changing that it's really important that winemakers and wineries understand that this is a gray area, and that there are, with the internet and online reporting and online license registration, it's really easy for the states to sort of police who's shipping wine into their state. For example, a lot of winemakers and wineries know about this. Last year, I guess it was 2014, an attorney in Illinois started contacting random wineries, mainly in California, and ordering a 6-pack of wine, 3 bottles, a bottle here, a bottle there, and having it shipped to him in Illinois. Well, then he would check on the website and see if these wineries were actually licensed for an out-of-state shipper permit. And when he found that they weren't, he would then sue that winery for failure to pay excise taxes on the wine that they had shipped into the state. And not only were wineries fined for not having the license and penalties were imposed, but they had a ton of attorney's fees having to defend the lawsuits that were brought against them. And I worked for lawyers for a lot of years, and it just shows that they, as much as we need them when we need them, they're clever and they're devious. And it's just, you have to use so much caution when you're shipping to consumers in states where you don't hold a license. And that's something that's really important. So let's move on to licensing. So as I said, every state has different laws surrounding the shipment of wine into their state. The procedures for obtaining direct-to-consumer shipping licenses also vary from state to state. Some states, it's easy peasy lemon squeezy, as my kids say. It's, you fill out a couple forms, you send them a check, and you're good to go. Other states require fingerprints, extensive background checks on any partners if it's a limited liability company, who are the managing members, and it's very time consuming. And also many states have multi-level licensing requirements, where you get your out-of-state shipper's license, then you need to get label approval, then you need to register your brands, and then you need to have an excise tax account so you can pay the taxes on all the wines that you're going to be shipping into their state. The other thing is licensing. It's not an overnight thing. Anyone who's dealt with a government agency can relate to this. It takes usually 4 to 6 weeks from the date of submission. It's also really important, once you do obtain that license, that the person doing your compliance knows how to properly calendar the reporting times and renewal dates for your licenses, as well as when taxes are actually due. So moving on to reporting. again, I sound like a broken record, but every state that allows direct to consumer wine shipping, I would say 99% of them have mandatory reporting, sometimes to multiple agencies. You need to file something with the ABC, and then you need to file something with the Department of Revenue. Not all states are like that. There are a few that require that. And a lot of states now are actually in the 21st century and have online reporting. So you sign up for an online account and you can file your returns and pay your taxes online, which is great. It's still time consuming, but it's easier than snail mail. The other thing, and I skipped over this, it's really important to submit your shipping reports on time. Most reports are due between the 10th and the 20th of each month for the month preceding. So you ship a bunch of wine in February, your reports are due between March 10th and March 20th. There are hefty fines if you do not report on time. And I mean, some states it's $25, other states it can be as high as $150 or $200. And if you consistently file your reports late, some states can actually suspend your license, and then you will not be able to ship to that state. So reporting is time consuming. You have to know which report to file by which date for which state. It's a pretty tangled web of state by state regulations. So it's important that the person you have overseeing your direct to consumer wine shipping across the nation knows which report to file when. So let's talk about everybody's favorite topic as we're getting closer and closer to April 15th, taxes and fees. Again, requirements for payments of tax on wine shipped directly to consumers, it varies state by state. And then it's also regulated by the Department of Revenue. Normally the ABC doesn't really have much to do with that. The bottom line is you need to pay tax on every drop of wine you ship to a consumer. Excise tax. And it's important to know when those deadlines are. Some states want you to pay it monthly. Some states want you to pay it quarterly. Some states want you to pay it annually. It's important that your compliance specialist knows the regulations surrounding each state's deadlines and make sure to have those calendared and gets the tax payments on time. Most compliance specialists will set up a trust account, and you can give them money to hold in that account until the taxes are due, and then they'll file the returns and pay the taxes for you. And then I know what I do is then I submit a spreadsheet showing month by month how much money I've paid to each state and what it represents, if it's taxes or a renewal fee or a licensing fee. And then the fee required to obtain a direct-to-consumer shipping license differs from state to state. Some states it's $100 and you get a license. Texas, it's a 2-year license, it's $676. It's ridiculous. And then you have to pay for label approval on top of that. It's unbelievable. But you have to make sure that it's cost effective for you to actually get licensed in that state. Like I said, some states require fees for label approval and brand registration, and in some instances, a state may require a bond. I took over an account for Illinois. Illinois seems to be a problem state for a lot of people, and a compliance company that they had previously used had filed 3 of their returns late over the past year, and so they would not renew their license without a $1,000 bond. So you need, like I said before, you really need to make sure that your reports are filed on time, because it can end up costing you money in the end.
But all good information, and prompts me to think about, small to mid-sized wineries. Obviously the big guys got it pretty nailed as far as strategic planning and working with, FedEx and UPS and all the big carriers to ship to the, 43 states from California, let's just say. So a small to mid-sized winery, though, like really looking to get into this whole direct-to-consumer national shipping program, go about looking at hiring a direct wine shipping compliance management consultant. What are some key, attributes they should be looking at?
Okay. Yeah, the big guys, the big wineries, they've got compliance departments that are, have 30 or 40 people working in them, and they have specific departments that do nothing but 50 state direct to consumer, direct to wholesale uh, licensing and reporting. And, for small production and mid-sized production wineries, and that's honestly, those are the wineries that I want to work with, because not only do most of the small production and mid-sized production people make delicious and delightful wine, but they just don't have the resources available to them to have a full-time compliance person or a compliance department.
Mm-hmm.
And I really pride myself on helping those winemakers do what they do best, which is make wine. So let me do what I do best, which is paperwork, which
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's a dubious honor or not. But so some of the advice I have is choose the right person for the job. And there's a picture of me holding a glass of wine. You need someone who, like I said before, attention to detail, organized, is able to, unravel the web and the bureaucracy surrounding the ABC and the TTB and the Department of Revenue. The TTB obviously being federal, but each state ABC department and Department of Revenue, and figure out what those licensing requirements are, figure out what those reporting requirements are, and make sure that dates are calendared appropriately, that taxes are paid on time, reports are done on time. I had one winemaker who came to me literally with a box of documents and said, I don't know what to do with this. I had someone from my tasting room doing the compliance. Well, being a tasting room employee has a completely different skill set. If you put me in a tasting room and told me to sell wine, I would be the worst tasting room employee ever. But put me at a desk with a bunch of papers and forms and having to call Arizona to find out what their reporting requirements are, I'm your girl.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has their own skill set, and it's really important that you find the right fit for your compliance consultant.
That makes
You
sense.
can't put a round peg in a square hole. It just doesn't work.
Absolutely. And Jenni,
The other
while you're on that subject, would you mind also, as we transition from, you've given some great tips on, things to think about for small to mid-sized wineries, how to approach compliance management and what to look for in a specialist. But on the flip side, can you also give us some examples of what not to do in setting up shipping strategies?
Do not ignore the importance of obtaining licensing for the states to which you ship wine. That's probably the most important thing. Obviously, it's not cost effective to go out and get 49 licenses. Utah, it's a felony if you ship alcohol into Utah, so I ignore them. So 49 states, getting licensing in all those states is going to be hugely expensive. It's very important that you do get licensed in states where you ship. Am I telling you not to get licensed? No, I'm telling you to use your judgment and figure out what states you ship to the most. Start with those. I mean, you have to start somewhere. But if you ignore every state and just continue to ship wine, the other shoe is going to drop, and there's lawsuits, like I said, in Illinois. There can be fines and penalties. I've found that the common carriers, UPS and FedEx, some of the states are giving them incentives to report what they think is a legal shipment of wine into a state. So that can get really scary really fast. So it's really important that you get the proper licensing. And then the other tip is don't do it yourself. It's winemakers again have their own skill sets. I don't know one winemaker who likes to sit behind a desk, look at piles of paperwork, fill out forms, interpret law and regulations surrounding shipping. Go do what you do best.
Mm-hmm.
Crush the grapes, harvest the grapes, make delicious wine that we can all enjoy. Find a compliance specialist. It's worth the money to have someone who knows what they're doing in that respect.
Great. As we wrap up today's webinar, Jenni, can you give us some advice on what wineries can do? Some, just words of wisdom for wineries really looking to build their direct-to-consumer shipping strategy.
Absolutely. So my first word of advice is prepare. If you are starting to think about shipping to a national audience, or you already are shipping to a national audience, but have decided that your sales in states outside of California are increasing and it's really time to start thinking about getting those licenses, you need to find a qualified consultant to help you get that licensing and maintain those reports, or hire someone in-house to come in and do that for you. The other thing is put compliance in your budget. That's a really important one. It can get expensive if you're obtaining a bunch of licenses at one time, and there's a lot of work to be done and a lot of organization to be done. So definitely put a line item in your budget so that you've got that covered and you can get someone with the expertise needed to get those licenses for you. Also, documents. Many states require your articles of organization, your LLC information, your TTB license, your ABC license, COLAs, label approvals. They're going to want to see all that stuff. So gather all that stuff together so when you do hire a compliance consultant, they're ready to go. And most compliance consultants, including myself, I've got a brief questionnaire that I have winemakers fill out, so I have all their information and a checklist of documents that they need to provide to me. Patience. Direct wine shipping licensing takes time, and it's not an overnight thing, and it's putting the wagon before the horse. If you go to a compliance specialist and say, I want to ship wine to New Hampshire in 3 weeks, that's not going to happen. It traditionally takes 4 to 6 weeks from the time of submission, and then you may have to register your labels or brands afterwards. Also, it's a government agency. Throwing money at it to expedite it doesn't work, unfortunately. I've tried many times and it doesn't work. And then relax. Once your licensing is in place or you have a consultant working with you, you know that you are shipping legally to your national customers, and you can ship with confidence knowing that everything is taken care of, and it's not a roll of the dice every time you ship to a customer in a state outside of California. I just want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this webinar today, and to let you know if you have any questions or would like to discuss your shipping strategy, to go ahead and contact me at www.firstglasswinecompliance.com or firstglasswinecompliance@gmail.com.
And thank you so much, Jenni, for taking time out of your schedule today. I really appreciate your words of wisdom. I think you've given the audience here some great tips around best practices. And as Jenni mentioned, please do feel free to contact her directly. Set up a complimentary consultation. For the next month, she's offering a complimentary consultation to learn more about her services. In case you missed her contact information, you can also find that at DTC Wine Workshops on the Consultant Network page. Download her bio, give her a call directly, or shoot her an email. Thank you all for taking time out today. Again, Sandra Hess, DTC Wine Workshops. Catch us next for our intro webinar coming up here in April. Cheers.